Um, okay, today on the podcast, I'm joined by Michael Phillips. Michael is the founding editor of the Richmonder. Is that how it's pronounced? I didn't ask you that.
You
Okay,
nailed it.
okay, Richmonder, which is a nonprofit news outlet in Richmond, Virginia, that spotlights the best of the community while keeping a watchful eye on those in power. So, Michael, thanks for joining me, and nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to talk local news.
Yes, I know it's really fun. Cool. So I kind of start every podcast the same. I just love if you could tell us a bit about your background and your story in local media and like what brought you to where you are now.
Sure thing. I grew up in Kansas, ended up in D.C. working for the Washington Nationals baseball team. I'm actually a big sports guy, and that brought me down here to Richmond, where I was a sports writer for a long time. Here at the Times-Dispatch, our local paper, was the sports editor. It was something fun called the senior editor, which meant they just go do stuff, projects and fun stuff like that. And then I think the interesting part here is I kind of had the front row while covering sports to watching the decline of local media and the decline of newspapers, and certainly got to know a lot of our local reporters and see the important work they do. And, I often share kind of one of the big pivotal moments here was the newspaper's decision to stop going to city council meetings in Richmond, Virginia, city of 1 million people, not in the city itself, but metro area. Certainly a lot of news generated here. And kind of this gradual then sudden realization that this isn't going to work. Like, I'm not going to retire here because I see where the market's headed. I see the trend lines, and I see why this isn't working. And also, at the same time, I think there's more of a need for news than ever. And I think everybody understands the importance of local news and the importance of what it brings to the ecosystem. And so, yeah, we were inspired by a group called Cardinal News, a nonprofit down the way in Roanoke, Virginia, that's gotten some acclaim. I actually called their editor, Dwayne Yancey is his name. He's a phenomenal writer, and told him when I said, "Hey, like, do you think we could do this here?" And he was incredibly kind. Spent an hour with me, kind of walked me through the whole thing, why we do what we do. I asked a couple people who were really respected, talented journalists here, like, "Hey, should you do this thing?" And they're both like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So we had a team. We picked up a development director who had been in the media space. It's just one of those things, like, just the snowball and the momentum kept rolling. And kind of our initial pitch was a lot of what I just said, that I say, even if you never read about a city council meeting, and I hope you do, I think our stories are really good, but even if you never do, I think you benefit from us having sat in that room, from us keeping an eye on people, and from us keeping an eye on the city. And I just think that's an incredibly important function of the press, and I'm not going to let it die on my watch.
That's great. I love your attitude on the whole thing. And you had mentioned that nobody was covering like City Hall. That was shocking because I think you sent me an impact report from like a year ago, or maybe I was on your website.
Yep.
And it's kind of cool because you said that nobody was covering it, and then the week after you showed up, there were like 4 newspapers covering it or something.
7 media members.
7
at the one, so all 3 TV stations, the Business Report, the newspaper came back, and the NPR station in town were all there. I love that. So our tagline is elevating the conversation, and I think I can do a lot of really cool things because we're a nonprofit. And I think one of the coolest things we can do is celebrate other media in Richmond, Virginia. Like, that doesn't bother me. I love that. I would love. I still have a lot of friends at the newspaper, so I root for them. I would love for them to be really good. Like, I'd love to have a good old-fashioned media war, like back in the day with them, where we compete for scoops. We're elevating the conversation because we're talking about it. Other people are talking about civics and city government and these issues, and it's now cool for the TV station to go be back in that space. And if people get their news from TV and learn about the city council meeting in a roundabout way because we exist, I never see a penny of that. But as a nonprofit, we celebrate that civic impact.
That's great. You touched on a few things I wanted to ask you about there. You mentioned that, you're a nonprofit. This comes up a lot on the show. I have folks from for-profits and nonprofits, and everybody has a slightly different answer. But I'd like to hear, like, kind of when you were starting the Richmonder. Can you talk about your decision to take the nonprofit route and what thought went into that? Yeah.
We sat down with some people who said, we'll invest. Like, we won't donate. We'll invest. We'll give you money. We think you build this thing. And I'd tease it out with them. I'd say, I don't see a path to giving you, 10x on your money, 3x on your money. Like I just don't see our viable path to doing that. And inevitably they, spin it out and say, you're going to be successful. We believe in you. Yes, I think we will be here in Richmond. We'll do these things. These revenue streams aren't available to us, classified ads, all the things that newspapers made tons of money on. But once you're successful in Richmond, we'll franchise it and we'll put, 100 of these across the country. And that's where I was like, okay, I think our secret sauce is, I spoke to a group this morning of retired people at the Golden Corral, Paul, here in Richmond, right?
I love the Golden Corral. Yeah.
I love the Golden Corral too. They bought my meal. It was a good morning. We're doing great. We're doing great here in Richmond. But yeah, we're at coffee shops talking to people every day. Graham, Sarah, and Victoria, our reporters, live in the community, engage with people, and that's the secret sauce. And I can't export that to the Norfolker or the Washingtonian or any of those places. We're starting from scratch, and sure, there's technical things we do and expertise we can lend. I just fundamentally think that local news, the local part's really, really important. And when we start to talk about scale and, consolidating operations, I think we lose what makes it special.
Yeah, that's totally. I agree. That's kind of the two models. You keep it local, or I mean, I guess there's ways to franchise out or grow nationally, but that's just it's a different thing,
I think the market pressures will always push you back. And Axios does a phenomenal job here. I love their two local reporters, but you think about like how much of that newsletter is nationally generated. Like that's not their decision. That's a national decision. Somebody is always going to say, hang on a second, we can create efficient, like the market's always going to pressure you into that model. Yeah, I worked with Inside Lee, same thing. Gannett, Alden, name your place. Like just there's always going to be that market pressure if you don't insist on local ownership.
Yeah, yep, good stuff. So you mentioned you work at Lee and talked about Gannett just then. And you spent most of your career at a larger publication. And you said, got to a point where I think you said, I don't see myself retiring here. I'd like to hear just your takeaways on the differences between reporting at an established legacy paper and then doing this lean kind of startup nonprofit route.
Well, and I can even give you difference. We're 14 months old as I talk to you today.
Wow.
Like the first month, the battle was, who are we? And will you return my call? Right? Like, you call the mayor. Like when you can call anybody. I'm with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And like, even if they're in another city, they conceptually understand like, that's a person I call back. That's the newspaper. We didn't have that. Like, you're what? Like, I still have people calling like, I love that article about me. How do I get a copy? I couldn't find it at 7-Eleven. Like, you got a printer? Wait, that's how you're going to get a copy. This article, right? We're so much explaining to people who we are and why we are. I kind of go to the positives a lot, so I'll go straight to the positives, Paul. Yeah. We can do whatever we want. And it's not, I had great management at the newspaper. I loved everybody I worked for the whole time there, but there were so many ideas you would bring and it would be, that's not right for us. That doesn't do that. That doesn't fit the brand. We don't rock the boat, that kind of thing. And we can do whatever we want. Like it's a blank slate. It's a blank canvas. We can turn the boat as we're nimble. And I love that energy about this startup space. And I love seeing what other people are creating too. We had a call with, there's a group in Fredericksburg, kind of in between here and DC doing something like this. They had a great idea. They were sharing with me, like, you want to be a part of this? Like, we just say, yeah, we want to be a part of this because we can throw stuff against the wall.
Yeah, that's awesome. You can do whatever. And so something else came up in there. I didn't have it in my questions, but you said we can
Fire away.
Yeah, you said we can do whatever, and you said, "Oh, do you have a printer? It's not 7-Eleven." I know it's like a digital first format, but what are you putting out? Digital newsletters? Do you have a print? Like what are the kind of formats you're publishing in?
Yeah, so the website's richmonder.org, and then we picked that because of the nonprofit association. So if you type in richmonder.com, it still works. It still takes you there, but we always advertise ourselves as .org just to really drive home the nonprofit nature of what we do and the advantages we think that gives us. But yeah, so we put out a newsletter 3 times a week to our audience of, I want to say about 8,000 people have signed up for it. Don't quote me on that. The number changes all the time. It keeps going up, which we love.
That's good.
Yeah. And so that's 3 times a week. We started with that because we were a small staff. We're a larger staff now. We stuck with that. We did some reader surveys and we found that people really liked the 3 times a week, and I think it positioned us as kind of maybe a more thoughtful entrant into the media space, that because it's not chase the news, write the news, deadline news, maybe it's a little more thoughtful in we have the opportunity to process and get out stories, but we post to the website every day, and we're dabbling. One of the funniest things I said the other day, do you know how many followers we have on Instagram? To one of the writers here, like, no, we do 100, 200. We don't do anything. We have 2,000 followers on Instagram. We don't do anything there, but figuring out this balance of like, we know who can fund us, and it's largely older people who are used to getting the printed newspaper, and the newsletter is a phenomenal, I think, alternative to the printed newspaper. I think it resembles it in a lot of ways. I think it has a lot of the positives of that. But how do we push ourselves on Instagram, on TikTok, on social to bring that next generation of people into the conversation, acknowledging they're probably not going to pay, at least not immediately. That's a long-term play, but I think as a nonprofit, it's an important play for us.
Yeah. It's social media is such a mixed bag. Like, that's where the people are, but they don't want to give you your own audience there or let people click out or anything,
Yeah, and I think everything we do, I would just say this to any media group, anything you do on social media has to be with the end goal of how do we get that user into our orbit.
Mm-hmm.
You're not at the mercy of the algorithm, because they could change everything tomorrow and wipe all your gains out, but get them into your orbit as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I've asked that question to probably half a dozen or more people on this show. Like, how do you get them off of social media? There's not a resounding great answer yet.
I was hoping you'd tell me. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
all ears when you figure it out.
Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg has the money to pay really smart people to keep people on the platform, is what I've taken away from it.
Well, when you figure it out, give me a call.
I will. I definitely will. So you talked about, like, you're only 14 months old, nonprofit. The one thing that stuck out to me on the, like, your impact report you sent me was that right out of the gate, the Richmonder exceeded your revenue expectations by, I think, 11%. What can you tell us, not necessarily just about that number, but just about running a successful launch and getting these donors and these sponsors and everything? And what advice would you offer others who might want to launch something like this?
I think we're going to run a budget this year of $650,000 when the dust clears. I would never have envisioned that for our, first full year budget. That's insane to me. And we drew it up as a $400,000 a year thing. With that, like, that was the number we needed to get off the ground to do it bare bones. I'm sitting in our office, like that was something we were able to add that we didn't plan on initially. That I love. We can go down this rabbit hole. There's 4 of us, and we had 2 interns over the summer, because I just really, really believe, in bringing in young journalists and giving them the opportunity to watch and observe. But in terms of the budget, we added a full-time development director 2 months ago, which was, I think that's the next big thing. And right. So we've got our donors, $9.99 a month, people who read it, who love it. We have 1,200 people giving us money right now, which is awesome. Beats my expectations for the first year. 1,200 people at $10 a month. You can do the math, Paul. We cannot keep the lights on at that number.
Right.
Right. And so we need larger donors. We need corporations. We need foundations. We need national groups that care about the future of the news. And so getting in front of them, making the case to them. And then it's tricky because it's such a boom or bust thing. Like, I love playing poker. Like, you play in poker tournaments, it could be like $0, $0, $0, like, win $1,000. Like, you got to ride the highs and the lows. Like, we're chasing grants. You didn't get a grant. You didn't get a grant. Like, we'll put local group put $100,000 into it recently. That's a good day. So there's highs and lows to it. You've got to just figure out how to be as responsible as possible with those when you get them, where you use it to grow, but hopefully use that growth to generate sustaining revenue so you don't crash and burn.
Yeah, one thing I've been seeing recently, like, I put out a weekly newsletter where it's just like a curated on the local news industry, and I've seen a bunch of stories recently how, like, there's so many grants out there, and how many of the newsrooms that could benefit from them just don't know how to write grants or can't afford, like, a grant writer. And it's just been, like, on my radar. So it's interesting you brought that up. If anybody out there listening is looking for a business, figure out how to solve that problem. And
it's also tricky for us. A lot of grants go to specialized groups, and that's not bad. Like, there are a lot of publications that cover niche audiences and historically underrepresented groups who need a voice in the news. We are unapologetically general news for a general audience. Our stated audience is every single person in Richmond, Virginia, and anybody outside of Richmond who cares about what goes on inside Richmond. General news is not as sexy of a funding priority, but I think there's something to be said for bringing everybody to the table in a general way.
Yeah, it's funny that general news isn't such a priority because it's like so vital. Like you said, nobody was. I think also in somewhere one of the things I talked about when I was digging through your stuff, it said that I think Richmond City Hall with their budget was 600 pages or something like that.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna go digging it. You need people to like be digging this stuff up, and then if I recall, they're like, "Oh, sorry, yeah," and kind of tighten it up after that. But like that's why it's important, like in local areas, so stuff doesn't get out of hand, stuff doesn't get swept under the rug.
I mean, we cite a Brookings Foundation study. When a town doesn't have a newspaper, it ends up costing itself significantly more in cost to borrow money over time because corruption's just inevitable. I mean, we're all different when we're being watched, Paul, right? And you know, we're not there to throw grenades. We're not there to do hot takes. We're just there to say, here's what happened today, and it's amazing what a difference that can make.
Yeah. The kind of metaphor I always use for that is there's like when I clean my kitchen, and then if my wife is standing there watching me clean our kitchen,
So that's good.
it gets done to a different level. I'm not going to lie.
That's so good.
Yeah, but that's a good. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to write that down somewhere. I might put a post up about that.
Well, I usually say that if you love somebody, you'll tell them they have spinach in their teeth. And some of our reporting is telling the city they got spinach in their teeth. And we don't do it to provoke or anything. We do it because we love this place and we're looking out for it.
How I've never spent much time over in Virginia or anything. What's like the size of Richmond, Virginia? I know of the city. Like what's your reporting area? Like what's the population there?
Yeah. So you got Norfolk, Virginia down on the beach, which is about 1 million people, Richmond, which is about 1 million people, and then Cardinal News, which I mentioned, covers Roanoke and kind of the large rural southwest portion of the state. We're an hour and a half south of DC. One of the big trend lines here is every year we become slightly more of a bedroom community, which is something the community very much pushes back against. Tons of people moving here from DC. Housing prices have gone insane, as they have everywhere. But, people who were able to commute during remote work who have loved it here and have stayed here. Certainly the number one fact about Richmond that you may know is we were the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War.
That's right.
And that is still working itself out every single day here. And the newspaper, which I worked for, ran editorials into the 1970s promoting racist ideologies. And so it is not a past thing here. There are people who are very much alive here who have experienced that. And that's something we try to be very conscious of in our reporting. We have a partnership with the black paper in town, the Richmond Free Press, to get their perspectives, their stories into the Richmonder and in front of people. But it's very much something that colors everything we do on a day-to-day basis.
That's interesting. That stuff is, you're right, it's not gone away. It's
not the past here. It's very much the present.
I live in a totally different region, so I feel like disconnected from that kind of history because everything here is like 100 years old. And
I grew up in Kansas. And,
right.
You move out here and they're talking about the Civil War. Like, yeah, I read about that in school. Like, I don't know, we're still dealing with it here.
Yeah. Where in Kansas are you from?
Just Wichita, Kansas.
From Wichita,
University of Kansas. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just curious. I've been in Colorado my whole life, so I have some family and stuff in Kansas. So
my favorite thing is it's 6 hours to drive from Wichita to Colorado, Denver, Colorado Springs, such beautiful places. You get to the Colorado line and you get excited, and then you've still got a whole nother hour and a half of bonus Kansas on that drive. You're not even close.
Yeah, people fly into DIA and they're like, "This is Colorado," because it basically looks like Kansas out there.
Yep.
Cool. So I've been asking everyone this recently. It's kind of a tough question, but I like getting different takes anyway.
Bring it.
Flash forward 5 years, and I'd like to get your hopes and predictions for yourself in the Richmonder, but also the just kind of local news industry in general. How do you see things trending for you guys and kind of broader?
We can be the number one news source in Richmond, right? We are building the infrastructure and the capacity to do that as long as the readers come along, right? I always say, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, when I'm a journalist, right, this looks like a problem that needs journalism. So it's very rewarding to start the Richmonder and have people come along and be like, yeah, no, this is non-journalist, yes, this is what we need. This is what the city needs. I think more and more people will realize that, hopefully. I think we all see the increasing polarization of media. people want to hear from their side and that their side is correct. My long-term hope is that there is a middle and a center and it returns, and that we will be the voice of that middle for people who do not just want to hear their thoughts affirmed every minute of every day. But yeah, that's a very real fear I have for media as a whole moving forward. But yeah, just watching us grow from 3 full-time employees to 6 in 1 year, I'm very bullish on the industry, on the media right now. I think everybody will tell you there's a fear of a recession always looming. What will that do? What will that do to, that'll stress test a lot of startups, us included. And we work every day to make sure we'll survive that stress test.
Yeah. Man, couldn't have said it better myself. The doom and gloom narrative, local news is dead or whatever. I'm not I don't have a journalism background. And then I started this podcast a couple of years ago because I was becoming more interested in it, and I was working with some local publishers. And I have found like so many examples, just like you, of things working and just like coming together. And I'm very optimistic. I just had Sarah Beth Berman on the podcast from the American Journalism Project.
Yeah.
And
they just funded Cardinal News here in Virginia,
Oh,
which is
did
awesome.
they?
Yeah,
Did
great gift for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was saying kind of the same thing, just that this narrative just sticks around because it's, people don't dig deeper and see all these green shoots popping up and everything.
It's easier than ever to sell this message too. Like I do
Mhm.
feel like 7, 8 years ago, you go around the country and be like, hey, local news is a problem and needs fixing. Like people would ignore you. When we sat down with people at the start, like, here's the problem, here's the solution, like, here's the problem. People are like, yeah, we know there's a problem. Like people understand there's a problem.
Yeah. Yep. And it's local information and news and stuff. The trend lines have never gone down. Just the model kind of got blown up a bit there for a while. Okay, I got another question for you that came up earlier, kind of sidetrack, but you said you're on a baseball podcast. You're a sports reporter, and you're down in the kind of the South. I got to get your take on the bananas, Savannah bananas, man.
And they're
Talk about polarizing. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
my wife, who she's a sports fan, but like going to a baseball game isn't her idea of a Tuesday night. They're coming next year. She goes, "You're going to get us tickets, right?" I was like, "Oh, shoot, we're in. All right." I love that people are getting back into baseball because I love baseball and I played baseball and that's my sport. I think it's fascinating that he resists the Harlem Globetrotters comparison. He says, he's building a league and building a competitive thing. I don't think he is. I think it's a Harlem Globetrotters thing, but I think there's room for that. I think, like, what's the coolest thing to do in the summer? Like, hang out outdoors with people you like, and if there's entertainment, all the better. And they've tapped into that market, and I love they did a partnership with the Negro Leagues that they're rolling out this year, and they're going to roll it out here in Richmond. Jackie Bradley Jr. is from Richmond, is going to be one of their marquee players. He played in the major leagues. If it gets people out for a great night with their family, like, I can't be mad about that. Like, sure, is it real sports? Like, no, but save that debate for another day. It's fun.
Yeah, I showed my wife a podcast about them or something like that. And, she likes going to a baseball game here and there. And then next week, she's like, I put us on the wait list for when they come to Coors. Maybe I'm also interested in them because I'm in Colorado and I just don't want to talk about our baseball team right now. So,
but you beat the Nationals when you came out here.
Oh, did they? I haven't even...
another woeful team.
Yeah.
I'll plug my Parney time. Parney runs the minor league baseball team here, the Richmond Flying Squirrels, and does the little podcast. And he is good friends with Jesse Cole, the guy who runs the Bananas. We actually had him on the podcast for an hour talking about the business model. And he had kind of mortgaged everything he owned and was struggling to make payroll. And from that, this empire of filling up baseball and football stadiums is a really cool story.
Yeah, I've heard some too. Anyway, this went down a weird sidetrack towards the end here.
That's all I ever do, so welcome.
Awesome, man. That rounds up everything I have. Where can people find you online? Anything you want me to link to or promote or put out?
Yeah, richmonder.org is the website. Of course, you can put your email in there and get the newsletter, but I think also just, letting other nonprofit news leaders, for-profit news leaders know that we are in this together. And I think that, as we band together, it's been fun to go to these INN and Lion, events over the years and get to know people in the space. Like that's the most important thing. Like we have good ideas, steal our good ideas, but you have good ideas. I want to steal your good ideas too. I think that's how we're going to move this thing forward.
Awesome. Great to hear. That's kind of the point of this podcast. So we're of like mind. Awesome. Michael, Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you being here. This is great.
Paul, thanks for having me.
Yep. Cool. All right. Bye bye. If you want to